investigative journalist ranges from, and listen to this, issues like Gitmo's Khalid Sheikh Mohammed 9/11 trial, immigration, foreign issues. She's a TV correspondent, CW News 6 San Diego, as well as One America News Network. And remember this website, very important, thekdreport.com. And she streams live as we speak on Facebook. Kimberly, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Chuck. How about yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. I got a few ups and downs here that I'm working around today, but I can manage. You know, I was talking about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and you and I talked about all this stuff, and I just want to real quick mention, you know, the children that were found in Taos, New Mexico, okay? Yeah. And then the old man, apparently, was a character witness for the blind sheep and that 1993 World Trade Center bombing case. Boy, they get all over the place, don't they?
Yeah, it seems how it doesn't matter what's happening with any particular story with national security. There seems to be a common thread amongst all of these different stories. So, I mean, I think it's very telling that the U.S. intel community seems to be missing some of these linkages and or not reporting them, getting them out so we can learn about this in the media.
And training the children to learn how to do school shootings. Hello, does that kind of fall under terrorism, the blind sheik, the World Trade Center 1993 bombing? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, I mean,
way to go, FBI.
This is a sure way to disarm Americans. I mean, this is a sure way to go after the Second Amendment. We've seen that this has been a tactic for quite some time, and this is just very concerning to note that the government is now getting around to reporting that, maybe some of these shootings, these mass shootings, are perpetrated by people really wanting to get involved with terrorism. And this is the surest way to disarm our country.
All right, listen, as I understand it, you got an exclusive about some voter fraud going on in Florida. Wow, tell us about this.
Yeah, well, this is a story that I worked on back in 2013. It was just right after Michael Hastings, the journalist, was killed in Los Angeles in that car accident. I had someone reach out to me saying that they thought that the reporting on Michael Hastings was spot on, and they said that I was courageous for going out and reporting on the story as I did. And then, he said that he was with the intel community and had information about the upcoming election cycles and what, the government was planning on doing with the technology that was created. And at the time, I had, that's something that's very sensitive, and I had to double check, triple check, items. There were court cases I was able to look into to verify this person actually worked for the intel community. And I really think that people need to kind of square their minds around this, that the hacking that we're talking about now with the Florida election, there's been zero proof that this was done by the Russians. You've got congressmen of both parties and senators of both parties saying that this, the Russians have already, started trying to hack into the local elections in Florida. My source back in 2013 happened to be Dennis Montgomery. He's now been granted immunity from the U.S. government to talk about what's going on. He told me back in 2013 that the U.S. intel community had the ability to go into the voter rolls and change votes. And the way they did it is they just would go into a state, take all the voter information off it and copy it to a hard drive, and then they re-put it back on with the hard drive that they want to get the vote to turn out the way they wanted the vote to turn out. That's a big story.
Real quick. Do they physically have to go in and touch the equipment, or can they do this from another location?
Well, that I'm not as clear on. I don't know how they specifically do it, but what we know is that it's something to do with taking it to hard drives, and you take the old information off, and then you replace it with new information that they created or generated, whether it's through hard drives, whether it's thumb drives. So. But this is something that
we're hoping that we're hoping it's more difficult, Kimberly, and I'm jumping in here because we got to take that world famous break. And if you're watching her on Facebook, I haven't gone over there yet, but the beautiful Kimberly Dvorak, and during the commercials, she will make little shadows on the screen, and you'll say, "Oh, look, the bird Anyway, remember her website, thekdreport.com, and streaming at periscope.com and Facebook. We'll be back. CRN just Wilder with Kimberly Dvorak and TV correspondent CW News 6 San Diego, One America News Network, and remember that website, thekdreport.com. Kimberly bringing us up to date on Florida voter interference, fraud, and of course, immediately they're going to holler, it's the Russians, the Russians. Yes, they did it. Yes,
Yep.
Got to be the Russians.
Well, I think, we're just starting to get information about this, but what you've seen, and the Associated Press just put a story out about this, and, they've gone to the Intel Committee, they've gone to different senators, and nobody will go on the record stating that this is the Russian operation, with the exception of Mr. Ben Nelson, who's running for re-election in the Senate there in Florida. He's saying the Russians are meddling in the local elections in the state. So once I saw that story, this kind of piqued my interest this week, a little bit to the end of last week, as I kind of forgotten about this story because I kind of covered it and then I let it go because I couldn't at the time corroborate what Mr. Montgomery was saying, and he's a former U.S. Intel operative for the CIA and NSA. So he's, high up. He's a computer, genius, and he's the guy that came out with this, this information that it wasn't the Russians or foreign governments hacking into our election system. It was U.S. Intel, and they're using. And we also, for those who may not remember or just want to refresh everybody's memory, we had the WikiLeaks released all that information on Vault 7. And what was learned in that release was that Vault 7 was a computer program that could hack into a computer, a government, or any kind of, computer operated system. And they would make it look like, it was the Russians, or they could make it look like it was the Chinese. So we know the technology exists that the U.S. government can hack into our own systems and make it look like somebody else is actually doing these hacks. So I think this is kind of where we are with the Russia situation. And this is why President Trump has really kind of gone to bat. And, I've written about it and we've talked about it here. It seems like, Putin's the only one giving him a lifeline out there because the president is the only one at this point that gets to see all this information. And, the information he's seeing is like, the Russians, they may be doing some of this stuff, which, we know that they're certainly, capable of doing this type of thing as well, but we're not certain. And the Intel community is kind of quiet on it. But now that we're getting into the midterms here, you're starting to see Democrats. They're worried about the blue wave turning into the blue puddle, turning into a red tidal wave. Who knows? But they're the ones going on the record, but they aren't giving up any sources or methods. And we do know that this Dennis Montgomery has been granted immunity by the U.S. government, and he is talking, and he's letting people know inside Congress and the Senate what's going on and what he actually participated in himself.
There was a story that broke today that WikiLeaks is now claiming that the Senate Intelligence Committee has asked its founder, Julian Assange, to testify as part of the panel's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. Now, that might be very interesting, This guy probably knows a lot of stuff they wish he wouldn't talk about.
Well, I think it's smart. I think the president should grant him some sort of immunity to come to the United States and get the story out. I really do. I think that what we're seeing right now with the deep state and how they're just going after anybody that's associated with the president, and they don't necessarily, they found no collusion or conspiracy or anything, yet, they're trying to continue on with this investigation. I think this all ties together. I really do. The easiest way to solve a lot of this stuff is to declassify these documents. And the President of the United States can do that today. And I think that this may be the September or October surprise that people are wondering what the Trump administration is going to do. This could be it. Bringing WikiLeaks, Julian Assange here to corroborate this. Edward Snowden can corroborate this. I mean, you've got a lot of people inside the intel community who are not, giving their names up, but they're corroborating this information that this exists. The American people need to know this, because if they go to the polls, they need to know that their vote really matters. And it may be something where the United States is not going to get minute-to-minute election results, and we may have to go back to paper ballots, and it may take a little longer to count them, but at least we know we have tangible evidence that the election, this is who really won that election, because we have a paper ballot, and here's the vote, and here's the way it went. That may be where we're headed with this.
And you should be automatically on your toes, alert. The way the other side fights not to have voter ID. I mean, a very, very obvious thing. There's another story, Kimberly, I wanted to bring to your attention. The research director for Government Accountability Institute went into the Ohio voter rolls, and he did this last August, all right? And he found that there were 170 registered voters that are listed, and they're over 116 years old. And he's pointing out, there's your 10% of voters in current margin of victory, and source,
again,
$5 million that he pledged,
it could
to
be
fight
that.
voter ID laws in Ohio.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I was going to say, also in Georgia, there was another story, and I don't remember the exact figures, but it said that there were 300 people registered to vote in this little precinct in Georgia, but there were only 127 people that lived there. So again, who are those other people that are voting in this district that's small? We know we're getting trickling information about this. I think that the U.S. government needs to ensure that the election integrity system stays in place. They beef up security, whatever they have to do. But again, it's, we had the intel community, they used to use computers to get all this information back and forth when they're reporting on different things, on different, leads they were following. I've asked some of the intel people that I still know here, what are they doing? How are they getting information from this side of the building to that side of the building? They're saying, we're pulling out our typewriters, we're putting on our tennies, and we're running it across the room because we can't trust computers. We don't know who's looking in. So the U.S. intel community is already rolling back some of their high-tech, ways of communicating amongst themselves. And one just has to wonder, is there anything wrong with just a paper ballot? One vote, one ballot. And that could actually, you could get the results out if somebody wants to contest. Hey, there were 350 people that voted. There's only 100 people in that town. You'd have to produce those ballots, and that'd be the easiest way to see who really won the election. And it would be, it also, creates that integrity that we have come to enjoy in this country.
And I remember that video where Obama was talking to an illegal alien, and she was talking about, I really, really, really wish I could get involved in American politics and what's going on in America, because I love this country and blah, 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 but I know I just can't vote. And he actually, on the video, said they're not going to check. They're not going to check. And that's from the President of the United States.
Yeah.
And you're right. Paper, make sure it's not Chad hanging out. Just take that black
paper, like a Sharpie. Let's use it. This isn't a Sharpie, but you could use a Sharpie and put it in there.
That's what you do on absentee ballots.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, there is two people that are making comments, and I wanted to mention, if they go to vkdreport.com, do you have an email address there? Because this one guy in Colorado wants to talk about a crooked judge, okay, and I'm sure you'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. If he's on Twitter, he can follow me on Twitter, and I will follow him back, and then he can direct message me, so it's not in front of the listeners. That's the easiest way.
What about David that says he thinks you're not very attractive?
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's just wrong. I mean, give me a break. I tried really hard today.
You always look fabulous, yes.
Thank you.
Any more on voter fraud, or did you want to touch on this?
What I'd like to do is, this is now a story that I'm going to go back to, because now it's with the recent government ruling that is giving Dennis Montgomery some immunity in this situation. Now I'm going to go back and kind of get a little more in depth, and I'm going to go in and write a little more in-depth story on this and revisit this topic. Because again, this came to me in 2013. And this is when I first started talking with him back and forth. And there were a whole bunch of different people that I'm not at liberty to say who were looking into this story. And now, since the U.S. government has actually given him and granted him some form of immunity, it's a very, it's very possible that the United States could be, hacking into their own election in certain counties to kind of change the election outcomes. I mean, we don't know what's going on with the deep state. I mean, we're seeing the links that they're going to on a daily basis. And it just, I think the American people I just think that they know more and they know what's going on out there. And if we're able to get honest reporting out there about this, I think that it will create a groundswell. And I really just think it's why President Trump was elected in the first place. And if you look at this voter, or, I guess alleged voter fraud, we'll put it that way because it hasn't been, put out in court. But we put this out there, and one has to, take a look at, okay, well, what did President Trump do to win? Because they probably meddled with the numbers before, and he must have won by a lot of people to win. Because remember, on election night, Democrats and people, media, everybody was like stunned that Trump won. So one has to believe how many votes he actually received, and it may be that certain election locales were actually, these numbers were changed, as Dennis Montgomery has been talking about. And he's been talking about this since 2008 because he filed a lawsuit in federal court, and he actually won the lawsuit. So, I mean, this is all information that goes together and goes to his credibility. And I think now we're starting to see it. And now with the deep state and with this Russia investigation, I think this is just going to kind of grow. And I think the American people are very interested in what the U.S. government and the intel community can really do.
Yeah.
And they ought to be concerned.
I want to point out that during the Obama administration, the Pentagon was hacked by the Chinese, all right? But it wasn't a big deal, all right? The mainstream media, they had to cover up everything that guy did. Oh, no, he can do no wrong. Yeah. Now we find out that all of Hillary's emails, where she was hacked, it wasn't going to the Russians. And apparently a few people that should be in the know said that too was the Chinese. To me, it's almost like you pay a guy $10,000, for the fight, and you say, yeah, he's going to go down in the 6th round, and then somebody comes in and says, yeah, he got knocked down in the 2nd. What?
Yeah.
My guy got knocked down in the 2nd. Yeah, somebody paid him $20,000. You don't know.
Yeah.
Who's doing what on which side?
You don't. And then let's go back to when the Olympics were over in England and the whole talk about, Russia taking over Crimea. Well, 30,000 soldiers marched down to Crimea. And U.S. intel, nobody seemed to really care or pointed out that, here the Russians were literally marching to Crimea. And nobody wanted to talk about that when it was happening. But now that it's a convenient storyline for the media, they want to talk about the, Crimea, annexation by Russia, and it was illegal and all this. And if they knew any history about it, they would know that it used to be part of Russia and it was forcefully just basically given away. And so, and not knowing history on that also, kind of sparks this, uproar within the media. And then it portrays Russia as, something they may or may not be. So in this case with the voting and with the intel community, it's very concerning, I will say. And I would say that there's got to be a lot more, looking into this, and the media needs to wake up and start covering real stories like Dennis Montgomery. They need to talk about this. They can reach out and talk to NSA officials, and they'll learn about what's going on. Right now, they're not doing that because the storyline is Trump is, Putin's puppet, and, he's only, he's half Russian, and all of his family the storyline is so salacious that it's not even believable anymore.
Yeah, they ought to be ashamed of themselves, but I guess they were in the tank. And it was pointed out about, I'll go back to Obama again, all of the people, relatives working working for him who had top-notch relatives running the networks, the news networks, and the TV, and it was all set. Hey, we're gonna tell you what the news is and what you should be believing in. But for some reason, you've got Fox and you've got conservative radio and a few really good sites that are still getting the words out. And for example, what's his name that got banned? What was the guy's name?
Alex Jones.
Yeah,
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones, all right? You may not agree with him, but we still have, freedom of speech, all right?
Freedom
He's not threatening
association.
to kill somebody. He just says, the Sandy Hook school shooting was a conspiracy or something like that. Let him have that thought.
Yeah.
But no, we are determining. I am Facebook and I know what's best.
Well, and then you also, that was actually on YouTube. They purged all of his YouTube because he does a daily TV show. So they purged all of that off of YouTube. But what people don't really know is that all of these social media networks that we're a part of, on Facebook Live here, YouTube Live, Periscope Live, that a lot of these social media platforms are all kind of in the cabal of the left, and they're actually making.
And that thought right there.
Yep.
We got them in the left cabal. It's not a vault. Oh, that'd be nice to put them in the. Yes, never mind. Kimberly Dvorak, don't forget that website, thekdreport.com. You can watch her live on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube, and she streams live at periscope.com. And you spell the last name D-V-O-R-A-K. Be right back. Everybody's talking CRN Chuck Wilder with the one and only Kimberly Dvorak, award-winning national security, border security investigative reporter, TV, radio, print media. And it is interesting, that these stories, all we got to do is get them out there, and let's see how the mainstream media starts backpedaling on this. What do you say on that?
Well, I just think that this should be if the mainstream media is all about making sure that we get the votes right and that no country is meddling in our elections, then they ought to make sure that our country isn't meddling in our elections. And again, this may be something as simple as let's go back to paper ballots, because it's something we can tangible. I mean, we can see it, we can use it, and we can go back. We're not going to get the every 5-minute update like you do on election night that makes it good for TV, but you're going to have the integrity of the election that stands up to muster. And I think right now in this country, the lack of trust with the U.S. government, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, the United States government in general, the people just don't trust them anymore. And maybe it's just something where we need to go back to basics. But this is a story that's been brought up. Every few years it's been brought up, and this Dennis Montgomery, who's now been granted immunity to talk about this, is saying that the U.S. intel community, some way, shape, or form, is interfering in the United States midterm elections and then presidential elections. And if that's happening, why are we voting? Because that means somebody else out there is just going to determine who will be the next president, who's going to be the next senator. And as we see the stories come out daily about this deep state, this is another aspect of that deep state that people are looking going, I thought I was crazy for thinking that. But man, did you see what happened yesterday? So this is another one of those, stories, one of these, pieces of evidence that said, look, we need to kind of make sure that our country is being run by the people who put us there, that we are not, a puppet of Russia, that we're not a puppet of China, and we're not a puppet of the U.S. intel community, because that's what it certainly looks like right now. And I would imagine that's what the average American is looking and listening to this story. That's what they've got to be thinking. They're like, are you kidding me? Really? It's us? And whether that plays out or not, we don't know.
Look at your iPhone, listeners, if you have one, and think about this. It's no longer science fiction. See, there are so many things possible, and you can, wish and wish and wish that it wouldn't happen in the greatest country on earth. But there are a lot of people that'll do anything they can to maintain that power.
Yes, I
And
can.
Kimberly, we've run out of time. Are you in Washington, D.C., or are you in San Diego playing golf? What are you doing? Real
Well,
quick.
you brought up golf. Okay, I'm in Washington D.C. and as soon as I get off this camera here, I am out on the golf course. I am out of here and I'm golfing for the rest of the day.
All right. And don't forget your caddy.
Yeah.
It's the VKDReport.com. VKDReport.com. Kimberly Dvorak.